So IHOP is the International House of Prayer, originally in Kansas City, still in Kansas City, but now there are many campuses, IHOP campuses or satellite organizations around the world. And they've trained a number of their own young people to spread out and establish IHOP centers that focus fundamentally on 24/7 prayer. At Kansas City, the Kansas City location, that Holly and I have both visited. We've interviewed with Mike Bickle, though it's been a few years now, and had a tour of their campus. They have a room where people are always praying. So people pray on a schedule and they sign up or are delegated to be there for worship and prayer, and it's nonstop. And they have a camera running, and it's live streamed to anybody who wants to, tune in and see what's going on. They can watch the events of their prayer services round the clock. And that's their sort of hallmark ministry. But what people don't fully understand is what they mean by prayer when they talk about prayer. And that's something we should probably be talking about at some point.
Yeah.
Another thing is that Mike Bickle also received revelation from God for this purpose, and also has some unique teachings of his own that have been hallmarks of the ministry there. This goes back, let's see, what year did IHOP begin? That was it's been about 20 years, I guess it is, isn't it, Holly?
Yeah, I would have to.
I think it's
Go
about
back.
20 years. Prior to that, Mike Bickle was serving in various capacities as a young man, coming up through the ranks in churches and so forth. But in the fall of 2023, just a few months ago, a group of individuals who had formerly been leaders and partners in ministry with Mike Bickle at IHOP, but were no longer leaders there, revealed that they had been in conversation with a number of women who were victims of sexual abuse uh, dealt by Mike Bickle himself. And so, that became quite a controversial thing. There was an investigation launched. Uh, there are various places you can go online to catch up with the details. One source for that would be the Julie Roy's report. Uh, has followed this pretty closely and done a pretty good job, I think, of reporting on the events that have transpired. And so if you're watching this and you don't know anything about it, but you're interested in learning, that would be one place to turn. But if you just Google it, you'll see lots of chatter, lots of discussion about the events that transpired. But what ultimately emerged is that Mike Bickle, even before and then during the founding of IHOP, he was already involved in sexual escapades with women. Some of them were minors. And so he's been accused of being a sexual predator, of using his authority as having prophetic authority and apostolic authority to convince them of things, that what they were doing was okay, it was acceptable. He even prophesied that his wife was going to die and that the partner that he was grooming, as they say, would become his spouse eventually. His wife is still living, actually. And one reason why there are multiple reports of this is that some who were willing to keep silent up to a point in time learned that they were not the only ones who were being told these things and had been groomed in this same way, using precisely the same prophetic claims about his wife and so forth. And so that was an eye-opening experience for those who'd had earlier encounters with Mike Bickle. So now it's all out in the open, and others have had to leave the ministry. There are not just rumors now, but confirmed reports and testimonies from Misty Edwards, who's one of their leading worship. She's a composer and a musician who's been affiliated with IHOP for quite a number of years. And she's acknowledged some involvement of a similar kind with a married man who was also involved in worship there. And so it's an ongoing story of one case after another being exposed, where from the very beginning and even before, while Mike Bickle was purportedly receiving revelations from God for the establishment of this ministry, these other things were going on. Now, I believe that it establishes that he was never a legitimate prophet or apostle, and that his closest friends have often defended him and provided protection without vetting him properly, because if they had, they would have known not to regard him as one who had this kind of authority and insight into spiritual things. But they did. This includes people like Michael Brown recently has been doing this, defending him. Uh, Now they acknowledge that, of course, Bickle has done things that are unconscionable, but I don't know how they defend their defense of him over the years, when on our criteria, he never really had a legitimate claim to having that authority in the first place. And it's been a house of cards from the beginning.
Yeah.
And there are still some people who want to defend the IHOP vision, which was Mike Bickle's vision, received directly from God and implemented by him. They still want to protect the vision for this and carry it on globally, even if they have to kick Mike Bickle to the side because of his actions. But we want to say that his actions demonstrate that his vision was not itself a vision received from God. And so it needs to be reviewed from scratch and dismantled and reconsidered, as if it's all being presented for the first time. I think if you do that and you put it under the microscope, you'll find that it's not a genuine prayer movement, insofar as the way they understand the nature of prayer is a far cry from the biblical conception of petitionary prayer is. So we could be talking about that difference as well.
Yeah. No, I want to get to their conception of prayer, and also maybe come back to this activation of spiritual gifts.
Okay.
One thing I'll go off on a little bit of an aside here, on because I studied this a little bit. I wrote an article on this a couple years back when all the things related to Ravi Zacharias started to break. And there is a history in the church, and I found this in all the way back in Irenaeus Against Heresies, book 2. I found examples of charismatic leaders. He calls Irenaeus speaks of a Marcus the magician, who is using his charismatic and prophetic gifts to lure women into his chambers. And you can kind of figure out what Irenaeus is talking about there.
Yeah.
And it's something to be aware of. It seems to be throughout church history. There are other examples, I think, of someone like a Jean Vanier, who was on his way to being beatified by the Catholic Church before it was later found out after his death that he was doing things very similarly as a Mike Bickle, luring women in, and he was thought to be very charismatic and connected with the Spirit and so on and so forth. And there are others I can think of as well. So it's something to be aware of, because it's quite the demonic infiltration into what appears to be, the confines of the church.